Welcome to our video series. We will love to hear your ideas for future videos. Now, let's dive into the topic of the illusion of the soul. In this page, we will cover the concept of the acoustic mind and how modern technology can create a mathematical forgery of the human voice. Imagine receiving a late-night phone call from someone you love deeply, like your mother. You hear the slight rasp in her voice, the familiar pattern of her breathing, and the exact warmth of her laugh. Every molecule of the sound feels perfectly intact and unmistakably real. However, the shocking reality is that it might not be her at all. We are entering an era where sound is no longer a physical certainty, but a digital reconstruction. This mathematical forgery is what we call the acoustic mind. It represents a fundamental shift in how we perceive reality and human connection. As we explore this series, we will look at the mechanics of how these voices are built and the profound implications they have on our sense of truth and identity. This introduction sets the stage for a journey into the complex world of artificial speech and the digital echoes of the human spirit. To understand how we clone the voice, we must first understand the biometric soul. For millions of years, the human voice has served as our ultimate biological fingerprint. It is a biological miracle resulting from a complex coordination of lung pressure, vibrating vocal cords, and specific tongue configurations. When we speak, we are doing much more than just moving air. We are creating prosody, which is the invisible music of rhythm, pitch, and pauses. Research suggests that up to 80% of the meaning in our conversations actually lives in this prosody rather than the literal words we choose. The meaning is not just in the dictionary definition of the sounds, but in the music of the delivery. This is why a simple phrase can sound like a joke, a threat, or a declaration of love depending entirely on the tone. AI researchers realized that to truly replicate a human, they could not just record words. They had to capture the biological essence of how we push air through our bodies. By focusing on these biometric markers, developers began to see the voice as a data set that could be mapped and eventually recreated with startling accuracy. Before we reached the current state of AI, we had to pass through the phonetic graveyard. Early text-to-speech machines often sounded dead or robotic because they treated human speech like a static library. This was known as the concatenative era. Engineers would record thousands of isolated syllables and then awkwardly glue them together like linguistic blocks. While these machines had the right units of sound, they had absolutely zero context. You cannot build a living river out of frozen water, and you cannot build a natural conversation out of frozen syllables. Because the sounds were recorded in isolation, they lacked the natural transitions that occur when humans speak. The way a letter sounds at the start of a sentence is different from how it sounds at the end, but the old machines did not know that. This lack of fluidity made the voices feel eerie and mechanical. It was a graveyard of sounds that never quite came to life because it ignored the connective tissue of human expression. This era taught us that speech is a continuous flow, not a collection of parts, and that the secret to realism lies in the movement between the sounds. The transition from robotic voices to human ones faced a major obstacle known as the continuous problem. A sound wave is not a dictionary, but a continuous landscape of rising and falling frequencies. This created a massive wall in the development of artificial intelligence because neural brains, specifically the transformers that power modern AI, only eat discrete chunks of data called tokens. You cannot easily feed a rushing analog torrent into a machine that only accepts buckets. This is the fundamental conflict between the analog world we live in and the digital world of computers. To bridge this gap, scientists had to find a way to chop up the infinite smoothness of a sound wave into pieces that a machine could understand without losing the soul of the audio. If the pieces are too big, the sound becomes blocky and distorted. If they are too small, the machine becomes overwhelmed by the sheer volume of data. Finding the perfect way to discretize sound was the key to unlocking the next generation of voice technology. It required a new kind of mathematical language that could translate the flow of a river into the language of a computer. The solution to the continuity problem came through a process of shredding sound into tokens. Companies like Meta AI developed tools like EnCodec, which functions like a highly intelligent zip file for audio. The process begins with a continuous audio wave, which is then passed through a system called residual vector quantization, or RVQ. This technology translates the complex wave into a specific alphabet of sound. Imagine a factory line of ducks using lasers to scan and slice the audio into perfect little cubes. These cubes represent acoustic tokens. By breaking the sound down this way, the AI can handle the data in chunks while still preserving the intricate details of the original recording. This allows the machine to store and manipulate sound with incredible efficiency. It is no longer trying to process a single long wave, but is instead reading a sequence of blocks. This transformation is what allows a digital system to capture the nuances of a human voice while keeping the file size manageable. It is the bridge between the analog music of our voices and the digital logic of the machine, creating a scalable way to process any sound in existence. Once we have the sound turned into tokens, we can begin teaching the machine the grammar of sound. Google's AudioLM project treated audio exactly like text. By feeding a transformer model these acoustic blocks, the machine learned the deep statistical grammar of how sound moves through time. Just as a language model learns to predict the next word in a sentence, these models learned to predict the next acoustic token. They essentially gave the power of large language models to the geometry of sound. The machine does not necessarily understand what a word means in a human sense, but it understands the mathematical probability of what sound should come next. It learns the way a voice rises at the end of a question and the way it trails off when someone is tired. This statistical approach allows the AI to generate long sequences of speech that sound completely natural and fluid. It is not just repeating recorded sounds, but is actually composing new audio based on the rules it has discovered. This was a turning point because it moved us away from simple imitation and toward a generative understanding of vocal expression, where the machine can speak original thoughts in a human way. As the AI learns more about sound, it creates what we call the map of all possible voices. This is the acoustic latent space. In this digital universe, every possible voice is simply a set of mathematical coordinates. Whether it is your voice, a child's voice, a smoker's raspy tone, or a high soprano, each has a specific home in this high-dimensional cosmos. Your voice is no longer just a physical recording, but a specific location defined by numbers. For example, a voice might be located at coordinate x256 and y12. By moving through this space, the AI can find voices that have never even existed or blend the characteristics of two different people. This map is incredibly vast and contains every nuance of human vocal identity. When the AI wants to clone a voice, it is simply trying to find the exact address of that person's vocal signature within this mathematical landscape. This realization is profound because it suggests that our unique vocal identity can be reduced to a point in a grid. It turns the art of human speech into a science of navigation, where any identity can be reached if you have the right coordinates to guide the way. Before machines could clone us, they first had to learn how to hear us in the real world. This led to the robustness paradox. Traditionally, engineers thought that training AI on clean, perfect studio audio was the best approach. However, OpenAI's Whisper model took a different path. It was fed 680,000 hours of the dirty, noisy, and overlapping audio found on the internet. It listened to podcasts with background noise, grainy YouTube videos, and crowded cafe recordings. The lesson learned was to embrace the noise until it is no longer surprising. By training on messy data, the AI became incredibly robust. It learned to ignore the sound of a passing car or the clinking of dishes to focus on the actual speech. This is the ultimate ear in a messy universe. Because it was trained on the chaos of real life, it can understand people in almost any environment. This ability to filter out the world and focus on the speaker is a key component of realistic voice technology. It mimics the way human ears work, allowing the machine to function in the real world rather than just in a controlled laboratory setting, making the technology truly useful for everyday applications. The way these models actually process speech is through something called the cross-attention dance. Using the bar analogy, we can see how this works. Imagine you are in a noisy bar trying to hear a friend. You use the flow of the overall meaning to guess what must have been said when a loud noise muffles a word. Whisper's encoder digests the chaotic waveform, and then the decoder predicts the text. When a word is missing or unclear due to background noise, A mechanism called cross-attention looks back at the entire sentence context to fill the gaps. It is like a puzzle where some pieces are missing, but you can see the overall picture clearly enough to know what those pieces should be. This allows the AI to maintain accuracy even when the audio quality is poor. The decoder is constantly communicating with the encoder, checking its guesses against the available data. This dance between processing the raw sound and understanding the context is what makes modern AI so much more effective than previous systems. It doesn't just listen to the sound in isolation. It understands the structure of communication, allowing it to reconstruct meaning from the chaos of a noisy environment. In the year 2023, we witnessed the 3-second miracle. Microsoft's VALLE triggered a massive phase transition in the industry. They discovered that by finding where a tiny 3-second droplet of your audio lives in the acoustic latent space, the AI can hallucinate the rest of your vocal identity. You no longer need hours of recordings to clone a voice. You only need a few seconds. This small sample provides enough information for the AI to understand the core characteristics of your speech. Once it finds your location in the map of all possible voices, it can fill in the blanks for everything else. It can predict how you would say words it has never heard you speak. This is both a technical marvel and a terrifying capability. It means that a brief clip from a social media post or a short voicemail is enough for someone to recreate your entire voice. This efficiency has accelerated the adoption of voice cloning technology across various industries, from entertainment to accessibility. However, it also lowers the barrier for misuse, making it easier than ever to create convincing fakes. The 3-second miracle represents the moment when voice cloning became truly accessible to the world for better or for worse. Beyond just the sound of the voice, we have now mastered the ability to create bottles of pure emotion. Models like those from 11 Labs have proven that we can separate who is speaking from how they feel. This is achieved through style embeddings, which allow the AI to take your base acoustic coordinates and then inject an entirely separate vector of emotion. Imagine a scientist in a lab mixing liquids. They can take your identity coordinate and add a dose of joy or a splash of anger. This means the AI can clone not just the static shape of your voice, but the way it breaks when you cry or the way it speeds up when you are excited. These emotional vectors can be applied to any voice in the latent space. You could make a historical figure sound happy or a cartoon character sound devastated. This level of control brings a new layer of realism to artificial speech. It moves us away from monotone delivery and toward a more expressive and human-like performance. By treating emotion as a separate mathematical component, we can fine-tune the delivery of any message, ensuring that the machine conveys the right feeling along with the right words, making the interaction feel deeply personal. As these technologies become more common, we are facing the death of vocal truth. We are entering the post-vocal era, when a bank verification or a phone call from a loved one can be perfectly forged from a 3-second sample. The basic infrastructure of human trust begins to collapse. This creates what experts call the liar's dividend. This is a dangerous situation where fake audio is weaponized for scams and propaganda, and simultaneously, real evidence is dismissed as a deepfake. If we can no longer trust our ears, the value of recorded evidence diminishes. We have seen instances where scammers use cloned voices to trick people into sending money by pretending to be a family member in distress. In the legal system, audio recordings that were once definitive proof are now subject to doubt. This erosion of trust affects how we interact with technology and with each other. We must now develop new ways to verify identity and truth in a world where sound can be manipulated so easily. The transition to a post-vocal era requires us to be more critical of the information we consume and to recognize that the human voice is no longer an infallible indicator of reality. One of the most complex and controversial developments in this field is the digital afterlife. We now have the ability to create AI ghosts, or deathbots, that can speak posthumously in the acoustic identity of a deceased loved one. This technology raises profound ethical and emotional questions. Is letting a child hear their grandmother read one last bedtime story an act of profound grace and comfort? Or is it a necromantic distortion of memory that freezes us in our grief? Some people find great peace in hearing the voice of someone they have lost, as it helps them feel connected to their memory. Others worry that it prevents the natural process of letting go and creates a false sense of presence that can be psychologically damaging. There are also questions of consent, as the deceased person never agreed to have their voice used in this way. As we move forward, we must decide as a society how we want to use these digital echoes. The ability to speak from beyond the grave is no longer science fiction, and it forces us to confront our relationship with death and the legacy we leave behind in the digital world. This is a new frontier of human experience that requires careful thought and empathy. The human voice is ultimately just a mathematical pattern that can be forged. We have seen how AI can map, shred, and reconstruct our speech with incredible precision. However, the meaning in the pattern, the love, the connection, and the comfort it carries across the dark space between two minds belongs entirely to us. The machine has learned to sing our song, but it does not feel the music. It is our responsibility to maintain the human element in our communications. While technology can replicate the sound, it cannot replicate the genuine intent and soul behind the words. We must choose how we listen and how we use these tools. We can use them to bridge gaps and heal, or we can use them to deceive and divide. The choice is ours. As we navigate this new landscape of artificial sound, let us remember that the true value of the voice lies in the person behind it, not just the frequencies it produces. This brings us to the end of this video. We hope you found it informative and engaging. If you have any questions or suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. See you in the next video.